Hi, everybody.
Oh, hey Brad, I'm just checking.
That's okay. I just had texted you, but I guess you're starting it. So there you
Yep.
go.
Okay. You want to get started, Brad? I can just say a quick intro.
Yeah, go for it. And then I think we're still like, well, I guess it's 8:30 right now, so we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. This is a free webinar tonight. Brad Schiller, who already started talking, waving, is going to present and give great insights about college essays, what colleges are looking for, and how you guys can get started. And just some really quick housekeeping. I think everybody who came in, you were probably muted already. You can decide whether or not to keep your video on or not. You know, it's nice to see people, but that's up to you. Try and keep your audio muted, just because we tend to hear a lot of background noise. But absolutely, if you have a question, feel free, unmute yourself, ask the question. There's also a chat feature, which I'll start, that you can ask questions there too. This is meant to be interactive, so don't feel like you can't ask something or say something. You know, we want everybody to get their questions answered. So, and this will be recorded. It is actually be recording right now. And so I will send out the link to the recording tomorrow.
All right. Well, I guess thanks for the introduction, Debbie. And I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name is Brad Schiller. I'm one of the co-founders and I'm the CEO of a company called Prompt. We work with thousands of students on college admissions essays every year. And so we've started working with Road to College just to give you all a bunch of information about college admissions essays and how to approach them, how to think about them, and then also so you can find out a little bit about our services as well. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. As Debbie said, as we're going, please drop in any questions that you have into the chat. We'll be checking those relatively frequently, number one. Number two is if you do feel like you want everybody to hear your voice, you can unmute yourself and ask a question as well. We take a lot of questions as we go through this, and we try to make it fairly interactive. And not to mention, all of you, both parents and students combined, will be working on your college essays tonight. So parents, pretend you are 17 or 18 years old, and when you were applying for college, think back to when you were going through that process, if you did, or how you were as a senior in high school, and kind of actually go through these exercises as well as your students will. It actually makes it way more fun for you and more fun for your students, I guarantee it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We'll have a good time, and here we go. So just kind of a couple housekeeping things before we really kick things off. We have special offers for you all as a Road to College member. As Prompt, as I said, we work with thousands of students. We do two things. We do one-on-one coaching calls that you can actually work with one of our over 150 essay coaches on kind of figuring out what you're going to write about, work on your outlines, etc. You're probably not going to need that because we're going to be going through a lot of those materials tonight, but you might feel you still need it. And we also provide really detailed feedback on essays that focus on the content and the structure of essays, as well as sentence level grammatical stuff. And we find that no matter kind of how strong of a writer you think you are, or that your teachers think you are, your parents think you are, everybody can benefit from getting feedback on their writing. Everything that I write, I actually send to my team of essay coaches to read. And you know, I kind of write stuff for a living to some degree. And so just keep that in mind, like getting really good feedback from people who know what they're doing is really valuable. And we have a special deal that we're running, which is $25 off. And it's actually not just a package of 3 credits or more. You can get it even off of a single credit, which is normally $75 to get a review of your Common App essay. You can get $25 off of that. So you can get $50 as long as you act by end of day tomorrow. So how I always like to kick these things off is to tell a little bit about my story. So back in the day when I was applying to college, the Common App had, I think it was its first or maybe it was its second year of existence. And I did not write the Common App because I didn't think, I was like, I don't know how the schools will view this thing, etc. I was only applying to 4 schools. And so what I did was I wrote a few different essays depending on the school I was in marching band and in particular on the drum line. And so for Stanford and Illinois and Princeton, I wrote about marching bands. Okay, and some of my experiences there. For MIT, one of the essays that I wrote about was about how I wanted to be a roller coaster designer and that I was really into physics and had done a lot of various things associated with that and to learn a lot kind of about physics, engineering, that sort of thing, some of it tied to roller coasters. And so that was the essay that I wrote there. Now, you can imagine kind of, I had no idea what I was doing. I got no help on my essays whatsoever. I think the only help I got was my English teacher telling me that my marching band essay was good. Well, my marching band essay got me rejected by Stanford and Princeton. I got into Illinois, but I also ended up getting into MIT, okay? Because it really, that particular essay and my essays for MIT showed that I was very intellectually curious, very driven. And these are themes that we're going to be talking about quite a bit tonight. And, I really just kind of realized this stuff now, years and years, later, well over 10 years later, where I kind of look back at the essays that I wrote. I don't even have those essays anymore, but I know broadly what I wrote them about. And I can see kind of where I went wrong. Let's put it that way. So what I like to do is to really, if you're going to remember one thing from this entire webinar, it's really this mindset that we want to instill in you, which is basically that the purpose of your college application is not to get you into the school, is not just busy work. It's not to write some beautiful creative story. No, it's the entire purpose of your application is to prove that you will be successful in college and after you graduate. Period. Full stop. Okay? And you notice that does not mean that, okay, I have to be like the most creative writer in the world, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that I need to use all these analogies and metaphors and such in my writing. I just need to prove that I'm going to be successful in college and after I graduate. And we're going to talk about how to go about doing that today. And pretty much it's fairly simple, right? You need to prove to them that you're actually going to graduate, you're going to do well in your classes. You're going to be a positive contributor to the school's community. You will have a positive impact on whatever you choose to do in the future. And this particular college or school that you're applying to is going to put you on a path to achieving your goals. Okay? This is, just keep this in mind, like this mindset. Now, how are you going to prove that? You're actually going to prove that through your experiences. Okay? And so why is this important? I'm going to debunk a few myths. So we talked about a few things already, like creativity and such, but what I find is that whenever you search for college admission essay examples and such online, they actually do you and everybody reading them a disservice, because people just publish the essays that are fun to read or creative or have really nice narratives built into them, and some of them are really good. But guess what? That is something that maybe a top 10th of 1% of students maybe are going to write about. And guess what? The other 99.9% of students are not writing like that. And that is totally fine. That's perfectly fine. We work with students getting into all of the top universities every year that when you read their essay, you're going to be like, oh, this is a really compelling kid, but you're not going to think that the actual essay they're writing is incredible. It's going to be good grammatically, and from a sentence level, it's going to be easy to understand, and it's going to be very readable, and it's going to be very clear. But is it going to be exceptionally creative? No. And that is okay. It's more than okay, right? So you don't have to, this whole essay process is actually going to be a lot easier than you think it will be. So a few myths. One is you don't have to come across as the most well-rounded student ever, okay? Being good at everything, yeah, that's helpful, but what colleges are really looking for is people who truly excel at one or a few things, okay? You want to focus on like these things that you are really good at. Because what they're trying to do is build a well-rounded class of people with a lot of different skills. Next, needing to tell your life story. Guess what? You know, a lot of essays that we read are just kind of a narrative, personal narrative of their life story. And while this might be a really critical story for some students, for others, it's not that compelling. You might want to focus on something else, such as your intellectual curiosity or times that you've taken the initiative, etc. And the final one is it doesn't need to be creative or thought-provoking, right? You don't need to use metaphors. You don't need to use large vocabulary words. You don't have to be particularly thought-provoking with what you're writing. You just need to cover the content in a really clear way so that an admissions officer will actually understand who you are as a person within 1 to 2 minutes. And I know we've had a few chat questions kind of coming in as we're going, but I see one here about loving the drum line. Yes, I played the quints or the tenor drums, which were quite heavy. But we're going to actually go through and answer a couple of these questions on the next slide because we're going to have a little bit of time that all of you will actually spend doing a bit of work coming up on these next couple of slides. So proving you are going to be successful, right? Your experiences, the stuff that you've done in your life to date, these are your proof. Yeah, there's 5 primary traits that colleges are looking for in applicants. And so these are kind of like the critical things that are really helpful to cover within essays. The first is drive. So driven students are naturally going to be more likely to succeed at school and succeed in life, right? So driven students it's a good trait to have. And this is like pushing yourself to succeed no matter how long the odds, right? Going through and overcoming difficult situations and coming out a better person. The next trait is intellectual curiosity, right? These are students that learn just for the fun of it, right? In their free time to gain a deeper understanding of whatever subject or topic that you might be interested in. It doesn't even have to be related to school. It could be politics. It could be making YouTube videos. It could be, becoming a DJ, whatever it is, just learning to improve your skills or improve your knowledge about something is incredibly compelling to colleges and is something that a lot of students don't even realize that they should be writing about. Okay? Because people that actually like to learn and like to learn about the stuff that they might be majoring in college or that they might be doing in their future career are going to be more successful. Third, taking the initiative. So these are students that are not willing to accept the status quo, are very entrepreneurial, and always thinking of ways to improve whatever they're working on or any organization that they're involved with. These are the people that might be naturally gravitating towards being leaders in some way, shape, or form. But what's really critical here is that you're actually doing stuff and having impact on whatever organizations you're a part of. The fourth is contribution. So this is making your community, school organizations, basically any group of people that you are a part of better as a result of your involvement and your actions that you've taken. And finally, the fifth one is diversity of experiences, because students with different life experiences and have different ways of thinking about the world, which add unique perspectives to the student body. Now, some students may cover pieces of all 5 of these within their applications across all of their essays, but what you want to do is you really want to hone in on 2 to 3 of these traits that are like your critical traits, the ones that you are better at than your peers, that if you were to compare yourself to your peers or to other applicants to whatever schools you're applying to, these are the things that would make you stand out. So even amongst a bunch of driven people, maybe you are unusually driven compared to them or unusually intellectually curious. Okay? So I want you to just take a minute right now and just kind of write down what are the 2 or 3 traits that you consider your strengths. And I saw a bunch of parents that are on this as well. And you should do this, right? Write them down for yourself. You can also write them down for your students as well if you want. But go ahead and actually think about this if you're a parent from the perspective of when you were 17 or 18 years old and may have been going through this process. And so I might take a question or so while we're doing this, and then we'll also take some more questions on the next slide. So we have a good question here. What are we basing this research on? So I have not been an admissions officer, but I know many people who have, and we actually work with hundreds and hundreds of counselors and consultants and other advisors that are working with students through the admissions process. Many of them were former admissions officers at schools, and they use a lot of our content actually with their students to help them guide this through this process. So we have an advisory board of a number of these people that are extremely good at this process. And then we also actually work in partnership with Ethan Sawyer, the college essay guy as well. So we work with a lot of the experts in this space, and we've actually also seen more essays than any other company in the entire world every year to provide feedback on. So we'll provide feedback on almost 40,000 college admissions essays this year, just to give you a sense of that volume. Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide. So now that you have your 2 or 3 traits, what we want you to do is now we're going to develop and identify some experiences associated with these traits. Now, many of you may have already started on your essays, and that is fine. So you may have an idea about the topics you're writing about, and what you want to do is think through, is this topic actually the thing that I should be writing about, or how can I enhance or improve that topic? So here what we have is just a list of some general brainstorming questions, and actually at prompt.com/road to college, you can create a free account, and we have this content menu within that account that actually will have all this stuff and more that we're talking about today within it. And we'll actually have many additional brainstorming questions that you can go through if you want, but I've kind of highlighted some of the most important ones as we go through this. So what I want you to do is take the 2 to 3 traits that you've highlighted, and I want you to actually write down some experiences that answer the questions related to those 2 to 3 traits here. So if drive was one of your traits, then the question is, okay, what was this biggest challenge you've overcome, and how did this experience change you? What is your greatest talent or skill? And what actions did you take to actually grow this talent or skill? Right? Intellectual curiosity is like, what are those subjects that you're learning just for the fun of it? What are you finding yourself in your free time doing? You could almost think of it as like, what YouTube rabbit holes do you find yourself going down, or Wikipedia rabbit holes every so often? On initiative, this is actually probably one of my favorite questions, is like to think about your favorite organization. And now imagine that you weren't there. So you were never part of this organization or community or whatever it is. If you weren't there, how would it be different? So in other words, what did you do? What changes did you make in the organization that makes it is what it is today? Okay. So kind of like it's a good thought exercise. If I wasn't there, how would it be different? Right, so I'm going to let you all just kind of take a minute and write down some of your experiences. After this, we're actually going to talk about some of your future ambitions. Then we're going to put this to the test, these experiences, to figure out which ones we might want to write about in our common application essay. And I'm going to take some questions now. And so you can also drop into the chat window. This is a perfect time to drop in, hey, here's the topic that I'm actually thinking about writing about. For example, I'll take a few of those now. We'll take a few more of those later as we go through this process. But that's one of the most fun things that we get to do, is actually dissecting some of these topics and talking about how we can go about writing about them. Instead, if you have a topic for an essay, feel free to drop it in the chat. You can also unmute yourself and talk about it, but we'll just do this kind of as everybody is working on their few different experiences. And if you're applying, what I always like to say is, you know what, if you only have the common application essay to write down like 2 or 3 experiences. If you also have a bunch of supplemental essays to write, you might want 4 to 6 different experiences because you'll use those other experiences as part of those other supplements. All right, we have a topic here. So this is actually a great topic to talk about because a lot of people write about something similar. And so we have somebody here that's thinking about writing about a mission trip to a place in South America that I probably will not be able to pronounce, so I just won't bother. So interesting thing. So a lot of students write about a mission trip or a community service type of experience. And what you need to ask yourself in order to kind of differentiate yourself and actually make this like a pretty critical or important story is when you were on this mission trip, or let's say you're doing a community service event, I want you to think about how were you before that event? So think about like your mindset, how you viewed the world, how you viewed other people. And then think about how that changed as a result of going on that mission trip. So are you now kind of more of, enjoy helping others more, or you have a different perspective on the world, etc. And that's just not enough, actually. What you need to do is, now that you have this changed mindset about the world, what you need to do is you need to prove to me that you are actually a different person as a result of this experience, which means that you need to show me that you're different by the actions that you've now taken as a result of going on that mission trip or doing a community service event. So if you just did a mission trip, you went somewhere, you came back, and nothing really about your life overall changed and what you do on a regular basis, then I would not write about that experience. However, if after you came back from your mission trip, you realized, I need to do something to help in a much deeper way, and maybe you started raising funds for a certain community or certain types of people, or maybe you do more community service now, or you do other things that you would not have done otherwise, except that your mind, kind of like how you viewed the world, changed as a result of going on this mission trip, then that can be a really compelling topic to write about, with the mission trip actually only being a short portion of your essay, and the rest of the essay being, here's all the things that I've done since then as a result of that. That makes sense, all right? So we have another couple of topics to talk about that people want to discuss. But what we're going to do is I'm going to cover those on the next couple of slides as we're going through these other, a couple of the other things, because I think people have some of their experiences written down now. So I'll cover the next one of these topics on the next slide after we talk about some people's future ambitions. All right. So I always like doing this exercise about future ambitions before we kind of align on what experiences to write about in the Common App essay, or even selecting which Common App essay prompt you're going to use. And we'll talk more about why we hold on selecting the prompt in a bit. But many of the best essays that we read, and this doesn't have to be the case, it's kind of optional, but what we like to do is include the student's future ambitions towards the end of their essay. And the reason for that is that it can provide a really clear narrative arc to the reader that helps the reader understand why the content in the essay is actually particularly meaningful to the student, and actually also helps me picture the student in the future on their campus or perhaps in their career, right? So imagine that you're writing an essay that's about, experience that maybe you had in kind of healthcare in some sort of way, where, for example here, we have somebody that said, okay, my, little sister's classmate might have been diagnosed with cancer, right, and helping the family through that time of life. That can be a pretty compelling essay to write. The thing is that maybe at the end of that experience, that's made you realize that you want to do something related to the medical field, for example, right? That then cements in the reader's mind that, oh, look at this, right? This experience they're telling me about really is particularly meaningful to this student, such that it even is impacting what they want to do in their future career, right? And it also provides me with a really nice sense of where the student is heading in their life and can help me picture them on my campus and after they graduate. So again, it's optional. I'd say about 3/4 of students provide some sort of look to their future in the essay. And that look to the future doesn't even have to be related to a specific career. It can also just be like a type of thing that you enjoy, that you are doing today that you want to just continue doing in the future. So for example, maybe you find that you really like tutoring other students, helping other students with their classwork. It makes you feel great about yourself. And in the future, you want to just make sure that you are kind of being able to be a mentor to other people, right? Whether or not you're going to be a teacher, or you're going to be a social worker, or you're going to be, in the business world, whatever, as a leader, whatever it is, all is that you really enjoy the feeling of mentoring other people and you want to keep doing that, right? That is completely fine. That's a great thing to write about. It still helps me understand the type of person that you're going to be in the future without necessarily saying, here's the career that I want to do. Because guess what? 75% of college graduates actually go into a career or are doing something that's not related to the major that they did in school. Okay. So nobody's going to hold you to this, but it is pretty nice because it does provide you with a sense of where you're headed. So I would like everybody to spend about probably take another minute max, just kind of write down what are some of your future ambitions. Okay, and since we were talking about we have like a number of different topics here in the chat. Since we were just talking about some medical issue-oriented things, I think one of the critical pieces of this is figuring out, is that the most compelling story? So if you might have a chronic medical issue of some kind, like how has that medical issue actually shaped the student and who they are as a person? How they view themselves, how they view other people, has that related to challenges that they've actually had to overcome in their life? And does that actually maybe relate to what they want to do in the future, right? So what we're really looking for is like times of personal growth that the student has gone through, and basically like a journey that they've gone through where they've of self-discovery in a lot of cases. And if the student's medical condition like tells that story, that can be really compelling to write about. If not, and they want to write more about intellectual curiosity or other things, that can also fit nicely in the additional information section as well. So you kind of just have to tell yourself, is this like a critical part of like who the student actually has become as a person, right? And has it changed their view of themselves, view of the others over time? Has it changed the actions that they've actually taken in their lives as they've kind of gone through it? Those are the types of questions you have to ask yourself. And the same is with, okay, sister's classmate diagnosed with cancer and actually helping the family through that time in life. How did that actually impact you? Like, how's that changed what you have gone on to do, right? So you're going to see a common theme here, which is basically, how did this, what I call like an inciting incident, this thing that was really an important moment in the student's life or experience in the student's life, how has that actually changed them? Not just saying how it's changed you, but actually change the actions that the student has gone on to take, the things the student has gone on to do in their lives. Like, that is the critical piece of this puzzle, is being able to write about that sort of stuff. All right, next, we're going to go through what we call the experiences test. And as I said, guess what? We're not actually looking at the Common App essay prompts yet. We won't even talk about the Common App essay prompts much in this session, but we'll talk about it probably right after this for a minute, because I always get some questions about that. But the reason is because there's a Common App essay topic for everything. So we're going to pick what's the best thing to write about first, and then we can pick the topic that we're going, the Common App prompts that we're going to write. So we're going to go through a test where we're going to take the experiences that you've now brainstormed, and we're going to decide on the 1 or 2 experiences that are the most compelling to actually write about in your Common App essay. There's a series of 5 questions that you will go through in this test. Every time one of your experiences answers a question, and multiple experiences can answer one of these questions, you're going to give it a point, right? A tally. Whichever experience or 2 has the most tallies at the end of this exercise is probably what you should be writing about for your Common App essay. So the first question is, which of your experiences tie to your ambitions, right? Your future ambitions. Because as I said, that could create a really nice narrative arc about where you're going in life. Again, it's not required, but we do find that it tends to work out really well. Next, which experiences actually played a critical role in forming who you are today? So in other words, you were a different person before the experience than you are now as a result of the experience. So if you were helping a family through a time of crisis because their daughter had cancer, then that may have changed you in some significant way, where you were a different person before the experience than you are now as a result of going through the experience. All right? Next, in which experiences did you actually take actions that displayed your highest rated values or traits? In other words, your traits, these 2 to 3 traits that you had identified earlier, or it might be just words that you would use to like describe you as a person, like which of these experiences really like highlight those in a significant way? Question number 4. Which of these experiences resulted in you learning something about yourself that then caused you to take different actions in your life than you otherwise may have taken? This is probably the most critical of these questions. As we talked about before with the mission trip, is writing about that mission trip is only really compelling if after you came back, the actions, the things that you have done in your life are now different as a result of doing that mission trip than they were before. And that could even just be like how you interact with people may be different than it was before, right? So it doesn't have to be like the biggest life change ever, but you do need to prove it to me that you are a little bit of a different person than you were before. Right? That makes it, your essay, so much more compelling. And finally, which experiences are actually related to a topic, an organization, a group of people, whatever it is, that always gets you excited to actually talk about, or that are particularly meaningful to you, or helping somebody understand who you are as a person. This is important because the stuff that gets you really excited, the stuff that's really meaningful to you, when you write about it, that excitement, that importance really shines through in your writing. Okay, it just naturally will shine through and will make your essay much more compelling. Right, so go through your experiences. As I said, mark these down. I'm going to go through 1 or 2 of these examples here and talk about them a little bit that people have dropped into the chat, and we'll go from there. So we have another one here. And next we're going to talk just briefly about the Common App essay prompts, and then we're going to talk about the 2 structures that you should use to think about as you're writing an outline for your essays, and then we'll wrap up, take some more questions, that sort of thing. All right, so we have here is that someone's son is considering writing about being a military kid, being in public school, virtual school, homeschool, back to public school, right? I've seen this before. So you have to ask yourself, what is the critical thing that the student learned about themselves from kind of jumping around to all these different things? So I've seen some really good essays about how somebody like switched schools and they felt maybe very comfortable in the one school, and then they had struggled kind of meeting friends in their other school, and then kind of went through this time of personal growth that they like started meeting other people, getting more involved in the school, etc. Okay. The key here is like it's a mindset shift. So how did this particular experience of jumping around contribute to who the student is, their understanding of themselves, their understanding of other people, and how they actually view the world, as well as the actions that they now take as a result of that? So perhaps as being somebody that jumps around a lot, you might see that the student has a different way of engaging with their peers. Maybe they are more prone to seeing students that are kind of on the outside of groups, social groups, and helping pull those students in to those groups, because they know how hard it is, right, to be kind of the new person or the new kid, or the person that's always kind of jumping around from one thing to another. And that can be make for some really compelling writing, because they understand something about themselves, they understand something about other people and how other people might be feeling, and they show empathy to those people, and then they actually take actions and act on that. That's just like one example. But you have to think through is that it's not just about writing, oh, I went to this school, and I went to this school, and I went to this school, right, and then I was homeschooled. It really needs to be more about who the student was from a mindset perspective and how their mindset changed. Their view of themselves or others have changed over time. Right? I know we have a couple more examples here, but we're going to get into those in a second. But let's actually talk about and start working on our outlines for our essays. Once again, parents, I hope you've been doing this too. You've identified some of your experiences to write about, and now you're also going to write on your outline. As I always say, is the best way to actually get your students to write their draft of their essay, of their Common App essay, or to show you their draft of their Common App essay, is to write your own essay. So we give trainings to hundreds of high school counselors on how to work with students on college admissions essays. I think we've trained over 100 students this year. And the first thing that we always have the counselors do, the first homework assignment that we give them, is to write their own Common Application essay, because it's usually something that the counselors have not done, or the teachers that are teaching this have not done since they applied to college. Many years before. Maybe they didn't even do that as part of that college process, and it's a very eye-opening experience for them, because it's actually much harder than you think it would be. I wrote one for myself. I rewrote one of my essays for the marching band one earlier this year, just for fun. Right, it's like a much harder experience, even though theoretically what should be done. And it will, I find that, if you set a date night with your student and say, we're going to read each other's essays on this night, it can be a lot of fun. And every parent that I know that's actually taken us up on that suggestion has had a wonderful time with it, because your students then get a good laugh and they get a better understanding of who you were when you were back in high school. All right. So let's talk about the Common App essay prompts really quickly before we get into the outline. So now that we've figured out what to write about, now is the time to actually select your prompt. And we say that because you can really write your essay about anything. It doesn't really matter too much. Most of the people that are reading the Common App essay will not read which prompt you are using before they actually read the essay. That is completely fine. One thing that you will realize actually through the essay, through this though, is that when you have a supplemental essay, it is actually very important to respond to the actual supplemental essay prompt. That is important. But for the Common App essay, you can really write about anything. And as a matter of fact, essay prompt number 7 in the Common App essay is pick a topic of your choice. Okay? Now, really quickly, you're probably going to write prompt number 1, which is kind of about your background or identity, prompt number 5, which is about a time of personal growth, or prompt number 6, which is about intellectual curiosity. Those are the 3 best prompts to write. Prompt number 2, prompt number 7. Prompt number 2 is about kind of a challenge that you've had to overcome. is pretty good as well, or the topic of your choice. I typically don't recommend writing prompt number 3 or 4. Prompt number 3 is challenging a belief. Prompt number 4 is about solving a problem. Less than 5% of students actually write both of those prompts, and far fewer than that should be writing those prompts. Those are really hard to write effectively and only work really well for a very small number of students. I would highly recommend not doing those. You don't get any extra points with the admissions officers for doing a good job with those prompts. Just write your best, most compelling story, right? That's why we picked the story, what we're going to write about, and then select the prompt, because that will actually lead to much better essays. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into, there's 2 types of essay structures to use. You're going to pick one of the 2, and then you're going to write an outline for your essay. That's like the main goal for today. All right. So the first outline, which is the one that the vast majority of you will use, is called what I call the journey essay. My friend Ethan Sawyer, the college essay guy, calls it the narrative structure. And what it is and why we call it this is because it's based off of the hero's journey, which is basically the structure that almost every story ever told utilizes, right? Star Wars utilizes the story of Lord of the Rings. A lot of romantic comedies, like all sorts of things, like use this general structure, okay? Because it's about like a hero and their journey through life to some degree. Okay, so in this essay, and I said over 90% of you are probably going to use this structure, and don't think, oh, I need to like do something really creative here and use the other structure because everybody's going to be using this one. No, just pick the structure that works best for your particular topic, okay? Said almost every story ever told has used this structure, so don't worry about it. First, you want to set a scene of some kind and drop some hints as to what is to come in your essay. The reason why it's important to drop some hints as to what's to come in your essay is that your reader should feel that they have a pretty good sense of how your essay is going to likely end after reading the first few sentences of your essay. And the reason for that is you don't want the person thinking, how is this relevant to the student at all after reading like your first few paragraphs? You want them to think, I'm going to accept the student, what I call the accept mindset, at every point in the essay. So it's helpful for them to understand, here's where the essay is likely headed. Remember, most movies that you see, I bet within the first 5 minutes of the movie, you could probably guess what the outcome is, right? In all James Bond movies, you know that James Bond is probably going to live, right? You know the bad guy is going to die or get caught, right? These are easy things, right? But what's really compelling is the journey along the way. So treat it similarly. Next, the first section of your essay, and notice I say section because it doesn't necessarily have to be a single paragraph, is the before part. So who were you, the student, who were you before what we call this anchor experience, which is like one of the experiences that you selected here to write about. What was your mindset? Who were you? Like, how would you describe yourself, right? Because what you want to do is draw a contrast between who you were before this experience and who you are now, right? And the whole introduction plus this before part of your essay should be no more than 1/3 of your word count. So aim for about 200 words or so, a little over that. Next section is what I call during. So this is like actually the details of what happened and the actions that you took during this kind of like anchor or critical experience that you went through. In some of the cases that we've seen already, this could be like what you went through in the mission trip, or actually spending time with a family that had a child with terminal cancer and that sort of thing. Okay, so that's this during part of your essay. And then finally, the last section that also includes the conclusion is what I call after, right? So what actually happened after this experience, but I also call this the new you, right? So you're this new changed person, right? So what did you actually learn about yourself, like your traits, your values? Like what did you learn about yourself as a result of going through this experience? And then how did you actually put what you learned about yourself into practice? So like what actions have you now taken that you wouldn't have otherwise taken as a result of going through this, right? So you're this different person and your actions are actually different. And how does all of this maybe relate to your future ambitions that you can use within your conclusion to wrap things up? And that should be about a third of your essay. So notice how this during part of your essay, like the actual details of exactly what has happened to you in this experience is actually only about a third of your essay. That's really important because so many students I see, that's like 90 to 95% of the content of their essay. They try to use all these fancy words and scene setting and descriptive language, other things like that, that just do not add much value to the essay because it doesn't actually help me understand what happened to you. All it does is set me a better scene for me. And you have a relatively limited word count. So that should be about a third of your essay. The most important part of your entire essay is this after section, right? Where you're talking to me about what actions have you gone on to take as a result of your experiences. So I'm going to talk about the next structure, and then you can pick which one you want to use. As I said, the vast majority of you are probably going to use this particular structure in your essay, and you can start working on your outline if you feel like this one works well for you. If not, if you already have your essay, actually go through your essay and see if you actually have all of these common elements to make sure that you're covering all of these pieces of content. Because we find ourselves reading through essays and we're finding massive gaps in the content, usually related to the before, the after, or not a compelling introduction in some way, shape, or form. And so many people focus on the during part of the essay, whereas the other parts of the essay are even more critical. Okay, the next one is called a montage structure. And what a montage is basically a bunch of different scenes that kind of get woven together. Think about, this is a very common thing that you'll find in movies where, let's say it's like Rocky Balboa training for the fight. Because you can't all of a sudden show him fighting and being like amazing. What you want to do is you want to show some sort of growth over time, a bunch of scenes of him training for this particular fight. And it's almost like a falling in love montage, for example, within a romantic comedy, right? Where they're showing a lot of different scenes of this couple falling in love, and that's how it goes. Okay, so think of it as like a bunch of different scenes in your life that is related to a common theme, right? So in this structure, you'll use set a scene and your drop some hints as to what's to come, which is usually like, this is the theme of my essay. Then in the middle of your essay, which can be a bunch of different paragraphs, usually we say like for each paragraph you have an experience that you've had or an anecdote, what you learned about yourself, and kind of how does that tie to your traits or what you value in life. And you kind of have one paragraph for each of your experiences. You might have like 3 to 5 paragraphs total in the middle. And then at the end of the essay, you kind of wrap up and talk about why is this theme really important to you and provide some look to your future, right? So a common version of this would be, okay, maybe a student wants to be involved with healthcare, become a doctor. They had a family member that got sick and kind of went through a medical experience. They may have had a friend that did that. Then they went and shadowed somebody at a hospital or volunteered at a hospital, and they realized they really enjoyed doing this, or at a doctor's office, right, or at a nursing home, whatever it is, right? They have a bunch of different experiences that all tie to this theme of them wanting to, be involved in healthcare, or a doctor, or cure cancer, or whatever it is someday, right? So all of you can work on your essay outlines right now. I'm going to leave the journey structure up as that's the most common structure. And then we just have a couple things that we'll talk about as we wrap up, but I'm going to go through and talk about just a couple more of these examples while all of you work on your outlines. All right. I'm reading a long one here about musical theater. All right, so we have an essay here that's basically So here's the thing. So if you want to be a musical theater major, right? So writing about something related to musical theater is perfectly natural and fine to do. But what you want to do is like think about the things that set you apart from your peers. Okay. So imagine all the other people applying for a musical theater type major, or the people at your school that may be doing something related to musical theater or theater in general, right? What are you doing? How are you spending time to develop your skills and improve what you do compared to other people, right? And you're not going to compare them in the essay per se, but what you're going to do is kind of helps you think through and identify things that you can write about in your essay. So the things that I like this angle that this student was playing piano. She didn't really particularly like piano. Now she likes it a bit more, but it ties in with kind of self-improvement and improving her skills because she knew that piano would be an important skill to have related to musical theater, right? Makes a lot of sense. What I would encourage you to think about is maybe piano is one piece of the overall essay, but there's actually other things that the student has done that show how driven she is. So we find that, for example, you actually may spend hours like dissecting like video of you performing, right? And looking for like little issues or gaps in what you're doing and how to improve upon that at those types of things. That is really compelling because it's actually showing analysis, self-learning, self-discovery. Those types of things can make for really compelling content. And we see a lot of people that are more of like athletes, for example, or people involved with music or theater, where they're so into it that they're constantly working on improving their skills. And that actually shows a lot of intellectual curiosity, because if you think about like some of the top performing people in whatever field it is, whether or not it's theater or athletics or music, they're constantly self-improving and improving on little things that they're doing over time. It's not like the Beatles were like suddenly great overnight. Right? They spent hours and like thousands of hours actually like performing and perfecting their craft and all sorts of things together before they actually got big, right? And this happens a lot of times, especially for a lot of the best bands or athletes or other people. Like they just spend so much time on this, honing their craft, improving little skills along the way. And I would encourage you to also think about some of that. Like piano could be a piece of the overall puzzle, but maybe there's some other skills or other things as well that you can kind of write into like a montage type essay under a theme related to musical theater. All right, so we have another one here, a son that's working in an observatory, in astronomy. Like that can be an awesome topic, especially if they want to go into something that's kind of, aeronautical engineering or astrology or planetary sciences related. What I would encourage you is, maybe don't write the entire essay about working in the observatory, but other things that the student has done that may all kind of relate to, a passion that's related to like astronomy, for example. All right. All right, and we have another one here whose son wants to be a finance major. And once again, like, think about it from this perspective. Is there some, like, what is the motivation behind that, right? So in some cases, like, if the motivation is just to, I want to make like a bunch of money or work on Wall Street or something like that, that's not as compelling. However, if they have like a really deep interest and like they're always kind of investigating stocks or learning about certain companies or reading through like annual reports, which are 10Ks for these companies, right? And kind of like building out like what they would do with it. That can be really compelling as like an essay topic around like self-learning and intellectual curiosity that all kind of relate to wanting to do something in finance. So you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what has the student done that might be related to this particular field of study? And does that make it like for a really compelling journey, or maybe like you don't want to talk about, oh, I want to be in finance, because it can be sometimes perceived in like a certain way. If that makes sense. All right, so we're going to talk about two things and we're going to wrap up. So the first is, so how do you get feedback on your essay? Well, you can use us, and I highly recommend doing it. It is honestly getting feedback from people who, one, are like experts at this, but two, have enough time to dedicate to this. So we'll spend 45 to 50 minutes providing feedback on like each draft of a Common App essay, for example, which, you know, there's a lot of really great high school counselors and teachers out there that, you know this stuff or know this fairly well in some cases. However, it's very difficult, especially given that we're, you know, a month away or so from the early action deadlines, for them to have enough time to devote to providing that level of detailed feedback on essays. That's actually why we work with over 100 high schools as well, that will actually review essays for students from those high schools, or those high schools will recommend our services to their students, is because the schools just don't have the capacity in a lot of cases to work with all of the students in the level of depth that they need to on a lot of these essays. But if you're going to go ahead and ask somebody to provide feedback on the essay, and I would not recommend asking too many people to provide feedback, right? So don't go ask 50 people, because they're all going to tell you something different. What you have here is make sure that you're giving them a set of questions that you want them to respond to as they're reading your essay. Because you won't want to just have them read it just for the fun of it. What you want to have them do is answer these 4 questions. The first is, what did you actually learn about the author? So in other words, after reading the essay, write 1 to 2 sentences that says, here's who I think this student is. What did I learn about them? What are their personality traits? What do they value? It's almost like what an admissions reader would do. Second is what I learned actually compelling? Do I want to let this get into my school? Is this like a really compelling student, especially compared to maybe other applicants of that school, right? Is the student like unusually driven, far and beyond what a typical applicant would be? Third is, what didn't you learn that you wanted to learn? So when I'm reading through an essay, I'm spotting all of these little things that are like, I wonder, so this mission trip one, right? I'm reading through it, I'm like, oh, they're great, they're going on a mission trip, yay. I wonder if the student came back and actually like, it changed their life in some way. And a lot of times I'll read that essay and the answer is like, it just goes completely unanswered, right? That question comes into my mind and it just goes completely unanswered in the essay. And so what you want to do is ask whoever's providing feedback is like, what didn't they learn in the essay that they really wanted to learn about? It's a very critical question. We usually identify in a first draft 2 to 3 really big gaps in content. And then finally, is this essay well structured? Am I thinking I'm going to accept this student from the beginning of the essay to the end of the essay, and how can this structure be improved? So most first drafts of essays that we get, we provide an example outline that the student can work from on their next draft that can improve, 1, how the essay is structured, 2, make it more compelling, 3, clearer, but also figure out what content can be cut and where can other content be added in to make it more compelling. As I said, always make sure you give questions to whoever's reading your essay to have them read it with an actual purpose other than just saying, what do you think about my essay? That's not that helpful, because not everybody knows what colleges are really looking for in essays. So at least have them answer these questions if you're going to just give it to somebody. So I'll take a few questions at the end, but instead, and wrap up here, go to prompt.com/road-to-college. There's actually a bunch of free resources there. For example, you can sign up for an account. You can input the list of schools that you're applying to, and we have a list of every essay for every single school that you'll apply to. Okay, so we automatically create an essay list for you, so you don't have to go into the Common Application and search all these crazy essays out, all the supplements that you might need to write. So I'd recommend doing that. We also have a content menu. We have a thing that can help you with your activities list, as well as like with a resume. It's all within there. That stuff is free. And then, as I said, more brainstorming questions on how to think about writing your content for your common application essay. All that's there. But you can also sign up for one-on-one coaching calls and you can submit essays to get really detailed feedback on it. As I said before, you can get $25 off either a single review or a review package of 3 or more review credits. The typical student uses 3 credits on their common application essay because you get 3 reviews of it. If you have some supplemental essays as well, you might use 6 total credits because shorter essays require fewer credits. You can use the Road to College, which is by 9/23, so by the end of day tomorrow. You can use the R2C early code to get $25 off of anything, even a single review of your essay. So instead of $75 for a single review, it would only be $50. A review package of 3 credits, which is normally $195 through Road to College, normally $210 if you come to rockpump.com, but $195 through Road to College, you get $25 off of that, so it's only $170 through the end of day tomorrow. We want you to get started now, so you can just get this done. If you get started tonight or tomorrow with this, you should be done within a week with your Common App essay because you'll get your feedback back within 48 hours. Then you take an hour, improve your essay, submit it again, get your feedback back, improve it, spend 30, 45 minutes improving it, submit it one final time, get your feedback, finish it off, and you're done, right? That's the goal, just get done with this essay. As I said, the vast majority of students that are getting into all of the top universities, when you read through their essays, you would think, oh, this is like an easy to read essay, it's very clear, and the student's content is compelling, right? They're not thinking, oh, this is the most beautifully written thing, that's in history, right? You know, it's not like you're Charles Dickens here, right? It's just a solid, really good essay that helps me understand who the student is and that the student will be successful in college and beyond. So as I said, I'll stick around for another 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, and take any final questions that have come in here. Okay, we have a great question here. Is what are the best methods to have admissions officers thinking except from the beginning of the essay? Great question. So what I always say is a few things. One is use fairly short sentences at the beginning of your essay. So say your first sentence should be no more than like 7 or 8 words. Okay, so it's kind of short, to the point. I like to set a scene in an essay. So give, for example, let's say you're writing an essay that's about like a concussion and kind of how you overcame that. That beginning scene might be you getting that concussion, right? So if you got hit in the head with a soccer ball, like boom, lights out, right? That could be the beginning of the essay. When I finally came to, I was in the hospital, my family around me, and I was groggy, light hurt me, whatever it is. I had a concussion. It was my 5th concussion or whatever it is. Then it drops some hints, right? I want to drop some hints as to what's to come. And in that case, I've already have a pretty good sense that this essay is likely about how the student overcame their concussion, but I might want to drop some other hints as well about how, overcoming the concussion wasn't the main problem. It was also dealing with not ever being able to play my sport again, but also kind of coming to a realization that I could help other people realize that concussions were a big problem, right? So what you want to do is drop some hints as to what is to come in the essay, because that helps the person understand, like, yes, I know exactly what I'm going to get out of this essay. It's exactly what I want. I'm excited to read the rest of the essay. And all of that should be in no more than 3 to 5 lines, that beginning of the essay. The longer the essay is, if I look at an essay and I see like a very long first paragraph, I think, oh God, I don't want to look at this. Like, I don't even want to read this. So you want to keep it short, to the point, drop some hints as to what's to come in the essay, and go from there. Great question here. So we have somebody here that is a junior. So number one is the Common App essays are very unlikely to change for next year. They just changed them last year. and they did a really good job with it. So it's unlikely to change for a future year. But what I would say is also don't write your essay until like, I usually suggest writing it in August of before your senior year, because there's a lot of stuff that you'll do this year that you'll want to write in your essay. And now, hopefully some of the things you learned here will actually help you think through what should you do or your student do in school during this next year to actually help them have a more compelling essay. So if they go do some sort of community service experience, make sure they're doing more things after that if they actually enjoy doing it, right? So if they go through this important experience in their life, help them think through what else can they go and do. Or like if they enjoy learning something, like try to build on that intellectual curiosity. The structure of why us essays, we have a whole awesome tool module within the prompt.com /Road to College platform. You don't actually get that one for free. As long as you buy at least one review credit from us, you can have access to it. But the why us essay, basically the general gist of it is you want to think through what is the student looking for in a college, and how does what the student's looking for in a college match with what the college provides, okay? And you want to use a very direct approach where you almost have like a thesis statement that says, here's why I'm applying to this college. I'm applying to this college for these 3 reasons. And then you list the reasons, and then you go through and like systematically talk about them. Instead, I could take an entire hour just on supplements. I think we might do a webinar on supplements coming up here in a couple of weeks. So, be on the lookout for that, because there's just that one in particular is quite a difficult essay to write and do well. But the nice part is they're really just looking for like, do you fit in with the school, and is the school a good fit for you, and are you a good fit for the school? That's what they're looking for. So they want to just see that you've done your homework. That's the general gist of it. Because a lot of students are applying to schools and just have no idea why they're even applying, and write some pretty bad YS essays. So even doing just a little bit of work there can make it significantly more compelling. So you have somebody is top choice school is really tricky. I'm guessing it's the University of Chicago. That's probably the trickiest supplement out there. I think that one of their prompts is like, if you were imagining that you were like on, I think it was like Columbus's ship, and instead of finding the new world, you fell off the flat Earth. Like, what would happen? They have some weird essay prompts for that one. All right. Well, as I said, we'll probably do one with supplements, at least in the next couple of weeks. Here's a good one. Athletes, should they use their sport as a focus of their essay? I would say the only time that there's 2 situations where you should use a sport as the focus of your essay. There might be a couple that I missed. I will scroll up and see if I missed any. So the only time that you should, as an athlete, you should write an essay, there's 2 situations. One is where you are finding yourself spending a significant amount of time outside of practice or games improving your skills. So in other words, like watching YouTube videos on how to shoot basketballs, like Steph Curry, for example, and mimicking those skills and practicing them and testing them and trying them, and like watching video of yourself and like dissecting that to make sure that you're getting better, right? That shows intellectual curiosity and self-learning and drive and that sort of thing, right? Another situation would be if you're a leader of some kind on the team and there's some like difficulties on the team that you had to solve. And usually that has a lot less to do with the actual sport itself and is more of an essay about like problem solving, overcoming a challenge, resolving situations as well. So I would say that is a fairly, just writing about like playing a sport is not that compelling, but if you write about it in one of those 2 ways that I mentioned can make it really compelling. Should I pick a student who's picking IB as a program part of their essay? I don't, I try to stay away from things that involve like grades to a large degree, or like selecting, oh, I'm going to take these like harder AP classes or other things like that. Those things kind of show through on a transcript. Usually with intellectual curiosity types of things and drive, I'm trying to find examples like outside of what would be like a normal classroom type of environment. Okay. Not to say that you can't drop that or mention that in there, but I'm sure if your student is really driven, and like a really driven student has international focus, there's probably some really compelling driven things that they could write about, but it's not like, oh, I picked an IB program, for example. All right, so let's see. Oh, I think there is a couple that I missed in here. Okay, so we had the IB one, so we did that one. No, we do not yet work with Phillips Academy in Andover. Happy if we want to introduce me to anybody there. Happy to always talk to anybody. Passion for travel through the lens of points and miles subculture. Learn from the blogs, how to get good deals, earning points, and getting the best perks, which have afforded her experiences around the world. I have never heard of this particular topic of, there's a passion for travel, and then there's this whole like gaming kind of travel to be able to travel a lot more frequently and for a significantly lower cost, and doing all sorts of that stuff. And I would say that usually students writing about a passion for travel is not that compelling in some cases. But in this particular case, it could be a really fun and interesting essay that shows kind of a lot of determination, as well as kind of like learning the ins and outs of a particular industry to be able to understand kind of how to use the system to her benefit in a significant way. I think that can be a really interesting and compelling narrative, especially if she can tie that to maybe some stuff that she wants to do as well. So that, I do think that there's some really interesting things that could be included within there. I think that enjoying the travel piece is a much smaller piece of the overall puzzle versus like figuring out a lot of these different things and, helping you bond as this transracial adoptive family. That can be really compelling as well as part of this. So I could see like a number of different scenes that would happen there. But as I said, you always have to ask yourself, like, is that, like, what is the most compelling stories that you have to tell? And that might be one, because as I said, it shows a lot of really interesting things. Like, so I always use this essay example that I call like the burrito essay, because a lot of it's about like a student who really was working at Qdobo Mexican Grill and was really struggling to figure out how to wrap burritos, right? And figured it out eventually. And it was just like this really interesting experience, but it also tied to other experiences. That wasn't her whole essay. Her whole essay wasn't about the burrito, only a part of it was. And I think that's kind of how you need to approach. That's how I like to approach a lot of different essays. Okay, I think that may have been it in terms of all the topics. There might be a couple more that ran in. Essays that are instructional, I would generally say no. For like a recipe that is a family tradition, I would generally say no to that. And the reason for that is my whole purpose of this essay is for me to develop a significantly better understanding of who the student is. And an instructional essay that, let's say, just talks about how to do a certain dish doesn't really, like a traditional family recipe. Maybe I understand that the student really cares about their family a lot, but I'm not getting kind of like how driven the student is or intellectually curious the student is, or taking the initiative, contribution. I'm getting a lot less of those types of things. I might get a little bit of diversity experience, but in general, I would try to stay a little bit away from just like having a recipe or instructions as like a significant portion of the essay. We have another question here. If you're not able to go outside of the country and do major community services, what are the best options for the student? You don't need to be writing about a mission trip or a community service experience at all. Okay. In fact, that only works for students that's something they're super passionate about, right? Because just writing about one community service experience is not that interesting, or just one mission trip is not that interesting. So instead, you should really be thinking about, as I said, like challenges that the student has had to overcome that show drive, or obstacles they have had to overcome, taking the initiative as part of like their community or their family or within their school. Not everything has to be school or activity related. It could be at home. It could be within the community. It could be helping your family and supporting them. There's all sorts of different things. It could be developing your skills or knowledge about a certain subject that the student finds really fascinating. This is about intellectual curiosity. There's so many different things to write about. A lot of people just think they need to write about community service, but you really don't. And actually, I find a lot of the best essays are not necessarily related to that, because the number of students that are really into like doing all this community service or mission trip or all that sort of stuff is actually really kind of few and far between. Yeah. Dennis's comment here, it's not about the topic, it's about the results, right? It's about the passion and like getting to know who you are exactly, right? So the topic is kind of a means of getting to know how driven you are or how intellectually curious you are, right? These are the traits that we're trying to understand that prove that you're going to be successful in college and beyond, right? And really kind of the level of those traits is kind of what I'm trying to get at in these essays, right? So I want to find students that like are unusually intellectually curious, like have a diversity of experience. They have a diversity of like different interests, right? Those are the things that kind of matter. All right. Well, we were a bit over time as well, but we had a lot of great interaction and comments here. Usually we don't go this long. Analogies throughout an essay. I generally say to avoid analogies. Only a few students are really able to kind of pull that off in a meaningful way. And a lot of times the analyses are just actually confusing to the reader. So when you find analogies or metaphors or other things like that within some of the best essays that you'll read online or what people consider best essays, it's like actually a fairly rare instance where we find one that actually works extremely well. Okay. As I said, it's really all about the content. Okay. The content is not necessarily the beauty of the writing or the metaphors or the analogies or anything like that. It's just like your experiences and proving to me that you're going to be successful in college and beyond through like the different traits and the values that you hold. All right. As I said, you have until tomorrow to use this $25 off coupon. So sign up at prompt.com/road to college now. Buy at least one credit. Get started. Get your essays done this week. Don't be like the vast majority of our students waiting till the last 2 weeks of October to do this, or let's say December 31st. It makes for a very unenjoyable New Year's Eve for our entire team. Get started now. All right. And that credits are valid forever. Okay. So if you use a credit now, you can just keep them going. Okay. All right. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for the good discussion. I'm very happy with how engaged everybody was. This was fantastic. Great session, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.